Thank you very much. Senator Niall O'Donnell.
Gormoigad a las Caherdy agus gormoigad Ira sa bhéilin hon play an our táhachtach agus mar ta clunthó gin gotí seo an our harave passionate seo comai agus is léir cén fá go bhfuil sé mar sin. Minister, I want to thank you for being with us here today and making your contribution. I appreciate the fact that there are members of this House with very long-standing experience and stakes in the issues we're discussing here today. And it has been very informative and insightful to hear some of those contributions thus far, and I'm sure and certain Senator Wilson will add to that after myself. Minister, I want to take the opportunity as well to welcome the representatives from PD4 and indeed the families who are represented here today. Sometimes I wish when I get up to speak on issues like this I could defer my place and maybe give some of them the opportunity to come in and stand here and say what needs to be said. But Minister, I do appreciate the input from yourself and the comprehensive report you give. And I don't think anyone here is seeking to attack or undermine you. I think what we have heard so far and the collective voice from this chamber on these issues is one very much of sincerity, dedication to the men and women of the Defence Forces, and indeed a very sincere and genuine aspiration to try and have some of the outstanding issues resolved. And because my colleagues have outlined quite a number of those, I won't engage in repetition here today. But I do want to make a number of points, Minister, while you're here. The operational capacity has been said of the Army, Navy and Air Corps has been stretched to breaking point, and morale amongst rank and file personnel has never been lower. By any objective criteria, the attempts at reorganising the Army have been a disaster, and when combined with the cutbacks in pay and entitlements, it is hardly surprising that so many military families are struggling to cope. The recent prime-time report showed how the reorganisation of the Defence Forces has resulted in widespread poor morale, with low pay, long-term isolation from family and home being identified as the primary drivers of the exodus of personnel, many of them highly trained and experienced individuals. The impact, Minister, of government policy on the operational capacity of the Defence Forces cannot be overstated. And I think the crux of this was outlined very comprehensively by Senator Crockwell during his own contribution. And for me, I make that point very consciously, Minister, because I do believe with this government we have seen an ideological stance that does not respect, does not cherish and does not appreciate the contribution of those held up in most importance and most esteem within our society. So for me, it comes as no great surprise, albeit a tremendous shame, that a government who leaves our senior citizens and pensioners on hospital trolleys, a government that leaves countless children up and down the state in hotel and temporary accommodation, a government that puts people into direct provision in the most, I think, unsympathetic way, would treat our Defence Forces personnel in this same way. I think it's indicative of a broader problematic culture, but one, Minister, that can certainly and I hope will be overturned. The government, it seems, is treating armed forces personnel unfairly because they are facing a blanket ban on trade unions in the armed forces. This ban has been found to be an unacceptable violation of Article 11 by the European Court of Human Rights. The government should lift the ban and allow representatives of the armed forces to negotiate the fixing of wages and conditions and ensure that they have access to the Workplace Relations Commission and Labour Court. There is serious concern also about the well-being of personnel, especially the government's refusal to withdraw the anti-malaria drug Lariam, which is being routinely used when for most other countries it is a drug of last resort. This cavalier attitude to the health and well-being of personnel is also reflected in the way highly toxic and dangerous chemicals were handled in Casement Aerodrome. Trainee personnel were being exposed to dangerous, corrosive and cancerous chemicals. The health and safety protocols at Casement are wholly inadequate. There should be an urgent review of existing procedures and protocols at Casement and other military installations where Defence Force personnel work with hazardous materials. The State must also deal with the claims by serving and retired Air Corps personnel more compassionately. In this regard, they should learn from the Australian military, who have introduced compensation schemes to assist retired and serving Air Corps personnel whose health was compromised by working with dangerous chemicals. So, to reiterate the remarks by Senator Crockwell, Minister, I suppose in some ways not to diminish it or not to downplay it, but you can spend all the money you want on material. You can spend all the money you want on capital investment. But unless you invest in people, people who are putting themselves at the front line, people who are stepping up in the service of the state, then I don't think it's worth a jot. Senator Gallagher referred to the issue of recruitment, and it was touched on by other speakers. I have a question, Minister, and you'll excuse, hopefully, my ignorance and maybe even my naivety in this regard. But I'm wondering, in terms of any recruitment drives for the Defence Forces, how much they can extend north. We can signpost people in Derry to the Wild Atlantic Way. We can put billboards up around Belfast directing people to Dublin Airport. I wonder if the Department are considering attending jobs fairs, careers fairs, universities, with the opportunity of bringing Irish citizens from the north who may be able to step up and serve as well. So that's perhaps a consideration moving forward. And I say that, of course, with the caveat that I wouldn't be directing anyone into a service which doesn't respect them, which doesn't protect them, and which doesn't give them the necessary dignity to rear a family, to build a home life, and to be able to serve their family and serve their communities as much as they do and are expected to serve the state, whether here or abroad. So, Shin Mamage,
Thank you very much.